Welcome back. So now we'll do part 2 of this introduction to participatory implementation science. And again, I'm Shoba Ramanadhan. So in the first session, we covered the what, why, and how of participatory approaches to implementation science. And I thought in this section, we could talk a little bit about some of the frequently asked questions that come up and share some helpful resources. So we had a meeting in 2020 of the Implementation Science and Cancer Consortium, and it was a really interesting mix of folks who have been doing participatory research in this space for many years, folks who are brand new, and a couple of, sort of categories of tips and tricks really bubbled up, and I thought I'd share them here. So the first was for folks new to engaging stakeholders and partners in implementation science work. There was a strong recommendation to join existing partnerships. So to look to colleagues at your institution or to find local institutions that are focused on translational or engaged research. So maybe a CTSA, a community engagement core, something like that, where there's already infrastructure and people are already working sort of in this engaged space. Another suggestion was to look to practice-based research networks as a great, again, infrastructure that already exists and that you may be able to slot into. Second suggestion was around, where we could find our people, find our partners, find like-minded folks. So looking at local advocacy networks was a suggestion that came up, looking to patient and community groups, and issue and population-based coalitions. So again, this idea that trying to find places where the work is already underway to avoid repetition or redundancy, but also to be able to join in and serve a complementary role. Third set of tips related to showing up early and often. So I know for us, a lot of our community partners describe with dismay, when researchers will come to their meetings, say for the first time, and then make a pretty significant ask. And part of it is that researchers are really excited about what they're doing. They want to share this, and yet it's not always very well received. And so this idea of showing up regularly, thinking broadly about the scope of things that might be related to one's research, and then leading with an offer instead of an ask. And then the other common tip that came up was this idea of leveraging networks to bring in additional resources. So I know for us, we often will connect community partners with researchers, policymakers, practitioners, others in our network to facilitate the work that they're doing, whether it's part of our project or totally separate. And that can be a great way to bring in additional in-kind resources to the partnership. And then the final set of suggestions that folks really raised strongly was this idea of transparency, and especially in the context of that continuum of engagement that we talked about earlier, wanted to be really clear that all partners are aware of and in agreement with the level of engagement and related expectations. So how much time is expected to be committed, turnaround times for different things, all of those things, the more that we can document and sort of set ourselves up, especially with new partnerships, the more we've protected that important and potentially long-term relationship. So another thing that often comes up with folks who are new to this space is a question about how to engage. So we can, as we can imagine, we have such a diverse set of stakeholders, right? So if we think back to that EPIS framework that we looked at in the previous part, there's so many kinds of institutions, organizations, actors, networks that we're thinking about in the context of our implementation settings. And so we can imagine there's a wide range of ways to engage them that would be more appropriate for some and more appropriate for others. So I'd like to highlight this great tool. You see the link at the bottom of your screen that actually has a selection process for you to think about, budget, time, how often you want to meet, things like that, what your goals are, and then it'll help match you with engagement opportunities. I've selected a couple here just to give as examples. So starting with the right-hand side, the advisory panels, that's a pretty common one we see, and I think most people are familiar with that. Use town halls, a great way to get feedback from folks that we might not normally have access to or be able to reach. Ethnography as a way of sort of kickstarting that deep engagement. And you may have seen there are a lot of rapid approaches within implementation science now. Co-direction of a process, again, sort of more community advisory board kind of model. Community engagement studios where folks will bring experts in. They could be community members, they could be practice-based experts, depending on what the project needs. And then they review research proposals and give feedback about what works, it makes sense. And especially from an implementation science standpoint, really giving that nitty-gritty feedback around what is going to prime this for success in terms of adoption, implementation, sustainment, et cetera. And then finally, human-centered design processes, where the stakeholders are at the center of the process. The research team works in collaboration with them and goes through this sort of iterative solution development process, again, with this eye to implementation concerns. So if you'd like to read more, I'm offering a couple of great resources here that I found to be very helpful. There's a really nice introductory chapter in the D&I textbook that Ross Branson, Graham Coldis, and Enola Proctor have put together. It gives a really nice introduction to what participatory approaches are and can do, and then gives a really nice case study so that you can sort of see it in action. The other thing I wanted to highlight was a really nice review that came out in 2020 by Luker and colleagues, and looks at community engaged research and kind of gives a really nice sense of the lay of the land and the range of things we might study when we're thinking about context, processes, and outcomes. It's not only about implementation science, but it applies really directly. And then finally, the Consortium for Cancer IS has put together a really nice resource package through the Community Action Work Group, Community Participation Working Group. And this is a set of resources for a wide range of audiences. So there's stuff for researchers, practitioners, and others who are interested in learning more about participatory implementation science. And the link is provided here. So hopefully this introduction has given you a sense of the what, why, and how of participatory implementation science. I thank you for your time. And I wanted to leave you with these pictures because I think the greatest motivation for working in this space is that we not only as implementation scientists get to be closer to that connection between research and practice, but the engaged piece offers such a great opportunity to ensure that any solutions or ideas that we're coming with are always grounded in the needs of stakeholders and needs of community. And as you can see from these pictures, it's also just a lot of fun. So I'll stop there and I thank you for your time.